It started with a single moment of cruelty that would change 3 lives forever. A delivery driver, running late and frustrated, raised his steel-toed boot and kicked what he thought was just another yappy neighborhood mutt. The small dog yelped and stumbled backward on the sun-drenched sidewalk. What that driver didn't know was that the scruffy mixed breed he'd just attacked wasn't an ordinary pet. Sargent had served 3 tours in Iraq as a military patrol dog, trained to detect explosives, protect his handler under fire, and take down armed insurgents. And the elderly man standing frozen in shock wasn't just some random homeowner. He was the father of the soldier Sargent had died trying to save. In the next few minutes, that driver would learn a lesson he'd never forget, one that would end with him on the ground, a crowd of witnesses filming, and the unmistakable sound of police sirens growing closer. Stay with us, because what happens next will restore your faith in loyalty and justice. But first, hit that like button, share this story, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories reach. The afternoon sun hung low over Maple Ridge, a quiet suburban neighborhood where American flags fluttered from porches and kids' bicycles lay scattered across manicured lawns. It was the kind of place where everyone knew their neighbors' names, where mail carriers stopped to chat, and where nothing much ever happened, which was exactly why 72-year-old Robert Foster had chosen to live there after his wife Ellen passed away 3 years ago. Robert sat on his front porch in a weathered wooden rocking chair, a glass of sweet tea sweating condensation onto the armrest. Beside him, curled up in a patch of sunlight, lay a dog that most people would describe as unremarkable. Sargent was medium-sized, maybe 40 pounds, with a coat that looked like someone had mixed German Shepherd, Border Collie, and a dozen other breeds in a blender. His fur was a patchwork of brown, black, and tan. One ear stood up while the other flopped down, and a thin scar ran across his snout. To anyone passing by, he looked like exactly what he appeared to be: a mutt, a rescue. Nothing special, but Robert knew different. He knew that beneath that ordinary exterior lived a warrior, a protector, a hero who had earned his name in the dust and heat of Fallujah. Robert reached down and scratched behind Sargent's good ear. The dog's tail thumped twice against the wooden porch, but he didn't open his eyes. At 9 years old, Sargent had earned the right to lazy afternoons. "Good boy," Robert murmured, his voice thick with emotion he still couldn't quite control. Even after all this time. Such a good boy. His son David's face flashed through his mind. 23 years old, Marine Corps K-9 handler, blown apart by an IED while trying to clear a road. The chaplain who delivered the news had also told him about Sargent. How the dog had detected the explosive. How he'd tried to warn David. How he'd stayed with the body, refusing to leave, until they literally had to carry him away. How he'd stopped eating for a week after, howling through the nights. The Marines had offered to reassign Sargent, but the dog had been traumatized, they said. Couldn't work effectively anymore. They were going to retire him, maybe put him in a shelter. Robert had driven 14 hours straight to Camp Pendleton to pick him up. That was 4 years ago. Since then, they'd been 2 broken souls learning how to live with grief together. The sound of a heavy engine rumbling down the street pulled Robert from his memories. A large delivery truck, one of those white panel vans with magnetic company signs slapped on the sides, was barreling down the narrow residential street way too fast. Robert frowned. The speed limit here was 25. This guy had to be doing 45. Easy. The truck screeched to a stop right in front of Robert's house, double parked with its rear end, blocking his driveway completely. The engine cut off and 2 men climbed out. The driver was a big guy, maybe 35, with a shaved head, a thick neck, and arms covered in faded tattoos. He wore a stained white tank top and cargo shorts that hung too low. His partner, younger and skinnier, had greasy hair pulled into a man bun and wore a company polo shirt that looked like it hadn't been washed in a week. Neither of them glanced toward Robert's porch as they hauled a large box out of the back and headed toward the house next door, the Kowalskis' place. They'd ordered that new entertainment center Martha had been talking about for months. Robert waited. Surely they'd move the truck once they delivered the package, but 10 minutes passed, and the 2 men were still inside. and the van sat there blocking his driveway like a beached whale. Sargent had lifted his head now, watching the strange vehicle with alert eyes. A low rumble started in his chest. Not quite a growl. Just a notification. Something's not right. It's okay, boy, Robert said, pushing himself up from the rocking chair with a grunt. His knees weren't what they used to be. Let me go talk to them. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding, one that would end with him on the ground, a crowd of witnesses filming, and the unmistakable sound of police sirens growing closer. Stay with us, because what happens next will restore your faith in loyalty and justice. But first, hit that like button, share this story, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories reach. Can I help you, Pops? The driver called out, not even slowing down as he approached the truck. Excuse me, Robert said politely, raising his voice. Would you mind moving your truck? You're blocking my driveway. I need to run to the pharmacy before they close. The driver stopped and turned, looking at Robert like he'd asked him to fly to the moon. Seriously? We'll be done in 5 minutes, old man. Can't you wait? I've already waited 10. Robert replied, keeping his tone even, and the pharmacy closes at 5. I really do need to go. Yeah. Well, I really need to finish my route. The driver shot back, irritation creeping into his voice. I got 40 more stops today. So why don't you just relax on your porch and let me do my job? The younger guy, the helper, snickered. Bro, old dude's got nothing but time. What's the rush? Matlock reruns don't start till 7. He thought this was hilarious. Robert felt his face flush, but he kept his composure. 72 years of life had taught him that anger rarely solved anything. Young man, I'm asking politely. Please move your vehicle. And I'm telling you politely, the driver said, his voice hardening. To back off and wait your turn. Sargent had positioned himself between Robert and the two men. His body was coiled, ready. The fur along his spine had started to rise, and that rumble in his chest had grown into something more intentional. A warning. The driver noticed. Control your mutt. Pops. Before he gets hurt. He's just protective, Robert said, placing a gentle hand on Sargent's head. Look, I don't want any trouble. I just need you to move your truck. That's all. That's all? The driver mocked, taking a step closer. You hear that, Kyle? That's all he needs. Like I'm his personal chauffeur or something. Kyle, the helper, was pulling out his phone, half recording, half texting. Dude, this is going on the group chat. Old man thinks he owns the street. Across the street, Mrs. Chen, a 68-year-old Korean-American woman who'd served as an army nurse in Desert Storm, had come out onto her porch. She stood there watering her plants, but her attention was fixed on the scene unfolding. Something about the old man's dog had caught her eye. The way it stood, the controlled tension. She'd seen military working dogs before, plenty of them. And this one. Listen, buddy, the driver was saying, his voice rising. I don't have time for this. Go back inside. Take your afternoon nap, and by the time you wake up, I'll be long gone. I'm not your buddy, Robert said quietly, his Marine father's steel finally showing through. And I'm asking you one more time. Move. Your truck. The driver's eyes flashed. Or what? You gonna make me, old man? You and your reject-looking dog? Sargent's growl deepened. Every muscle in his body was taut now, ready to spring. But he didn't move, didn't lunge, just held his ground, waiting. The discipline was absolute. Mrs. Chen's eyes narrowed. That's military training, she thought. No question about it. Your dog's got an attitude problem, the driver said. And before Robert could react, before anyone could stop him, the driver pulled his leg back and kicked Sargent hard in the ribs. The sound cracked through the quiet afternoon like a gunshot. Sargent yelped and tumbled sideways, his paws scrambling for purchase on the concrete. No! Robert shouted, dropping to his knees beside his dog. Sargent! The driver laughed, shaking his head. See? Just a mutt. All bark, no bite. That's when everything changed. Sergeant got to his feet slowly. The playful, sleepy dog from the porch was gone. In his place stood something else entirely. His ears were pinned flat, his lips pulled back to reveal teeth that seemed suddenly much larger. His eyes, a moment ago warm and brown, had gone cold and calculating, and the growl that came from deep in his chest wasn't a warning anymore. It was a promise. Kyle stopped filming. Marcus? Maybe we should go. But Marcus, the driver, was on a roll, pride and testosterone flowing. What? You scared of a little mutt? Watch this. He took a step toward Sergeant, raising his hand as if to shove the dog. Get lost. You piece of... He never finished the sentence. Sergeant moved, not with the chaotic aggression of an angry pet, but with the precise, controlled violence of a trained, military asset. He lunged forward, ducked under Marcus's reaching hand, and clamped his jaws around the man's forearm. Not biting down, not yet. Just holding. Then, using his entire body weight and training that had been drilled into him through thousands of hours of practice, Sergeant twisted, pushed, and drove Marcus to the ground in one fluid motion. The big man hit the pavement hard, his head bouncing once. Sergeant maintained his grip, his body weight pinning Marcus's arm, his teeth still not breaking skin but holding with enough pressure to make the threat absolutely clear. Move, and it gets worse. Marcus screamed, not from pain but from shock and fear. Get him off! Get him off me! Kyle stood frozen, phone dangling from his hand, mouth hanging open. Robert, still on his knees, said quietly, Sergeant, hold. The dog didn't move, didn't increase pressure, didn't release, just held position, utterly still, a statue of focused restraint. Mrs. Chen was already crossing the street, her phone to her ear. Yes, I need police at 847 Maple Ridge Drive. There's been an assault, and a dog is currently restraining the attacker. No, the dog is not out of control. The dog is... She paused, watching Sergeant's perfect form. The dog is executing a textbook military takedown. Send units quickly, but tell them the situation is under control. A car slowed down, the driver gawking. Another neighbor emerged from their house. Within seconds, 4 or 5 people had gathered, and every single one of them had their phones out. Somebody help me! Marcus yelled, thrashing slightly. Sergeant immediately applied more pressure, and Marcus froze. Okay, I'm not moving. That's smart, Robert said, pushing himself to his feet with difficulty. He looked down at the driver, and his voice was calm but carried weight. That's a very smart decision. Call off your dog, Marcus pleaded, his earlier arrogance completely gone. Please, in a minute, Robert said. First, I want to make sure you understand something. This dog you kicked? His name is Sergeant. He's a retired military working dog. He served 3 tours in Iraq. He detected over 40 IEDs. He saved 15 Marines from a suicide bomber, and he protected my son until the very end. Robert's voice cracked slightly. You kicked a war hero, and you kicked him in front of his commander. Mrs. Chen had reached them now, and she knelt down to look at Sergeant more closely. Belgian Malinois, mix, she murmured. Has to be. Look at that hold. The weight distribution. Perfect form. She looked up at Robert. Your dog served? With my son, Robert confirmed. David Foster, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines. Mrs. Chen's face softened with recognition and respect. She reached out slowly, let Sergeant sniff her hand, and then gently touched his shoulder. You're a good soldier, she told the dog quietly. Thank you for your service. Sergeant's tail wagged once. Just once. But he didn't release his hold. Kyle had backed away to the truck, looking like he wanted to disappear. I didn't know, man. Marcus, I told you we should have just moved the truck. Shut up, Kyle. Marcus hissed from the ground. How's your arm? Mrs. Chen asked Marcus, her nurse training kicking in despite her distaste for the man. Can you feel your fingers? Yes, Marcus admitted grudgingly. He's not actually biting me, just holding. That's because he's trained, Robert explained. He's been taught to control, not to harm. Unless you give him reason to escalate. You want to give him reason? No, Marcus said quickly. No, I'm good. I'm staying very, very still. The sound of sirens grew in the distance. 2 patrol cars appeared at the end of the street. Lights flashing. They pulled up quickly, and 4 officers emerged. Hands near their weapons but not drawn. The lead officer, a woman in her 40s with sergeant stripes, took in the scene with experienced eyes. Someone want to tell me what happened here? Mrs. Chen spoke up. Officer, I witnessed the entire incident. This man, she pointed at Marcus, assaulted this gentleman and then physically attacked his service dog with a kick to the ribs. The dog responded with appropriate force and is currently restraining him. The dog has shown exemplary control and has not injured the suspect. The officer's eyebrows rose. Service dog? Military working dog? Robert clarified. Retired. The second officer, a younger man, had crouched down to look at Sergeant. Sir, is your dog trained to release on command? He is. Can you demonstrate that for me? Robert nodded. Sergeant. Release. Here. Instantly. Sergeant let go of Marcus's arm and trotted to Robert's side, sitting perfectly at attention. The transformation was remarkable. 1 second. A controlled warrior. The next. Just a dog sitting beside his owner, tongue lolling out slightly, looking almost pleased with himself. The young officer whistled softly. That's impressive. Marcus scrambled to his feet, clutching his arm even though there wasn't a mark on it. That dog attacked me. I want him put down. Actually, the female sergeant said, pulling out her notepad. From what this witness just described, it sounds like you attacked the dog first. That's animal cruelty in this state. Plus, I'm betting you're going to have trouble explaining why you were blocking this gentleman's driveway and refused to move. She turned to the growing crowd. Anyone else see what happened? 6 hands went up. 3 more people called out that they had video. Marcus's face went pale. Look, it was just a mistake. Okay? I didn't know it was a military dog. So you would have kicked it if it was just a regular pet? The sergeant asked, her voice dripping with disdain. That makes it better? Somehow? I mean, no, but turn around, she ordered. What? Come on. Turn around. You're under arrest for animal cruelty and assault. Assault? I didn't touch the old man. Robert spoke up quietly. The kick to my dog after I asked you multiple times to leave us alone could be construed as assault, actually. But I'm more concerned about Sergeant than pressing charges against you. Mrs. Chen had her hands on Sergeant now, running them carefully over his ribs. There's going to be bruising, she said, anger threading through her professional tone. He needs to see a vet. That was a steel-toed boot. The officer was snapping handcuffs onto Marcus's wrists. You kicked a service dog with steel-toed boots? Are you actually that stupid? Kyle had his hands up. Officer, I didn't do anything. I just work with him. I told him to move the truck. You laughed at Mr. Foster, Mrs. Chen said sharply. You encouraged it. I'll need a statement from you too. The sergeant told Kyle. Have a seat on that curb. As they led Marcus to the patrol car, his attitude had completely deflated. This guy had to be doing 45. Easy. The truck screeched to a stop right in front of Robert's house, double parked with its rear end, blocking his driveway completely. The engine cut off and 2 men climbed out. The driver was a big guy, maybe 35, with a shaved head, a thick neck, and arms covered in faded tattoos. He wore a stained white tank top and cargo shorts that hung too low. You don't get to have bad days that include hurting innocent creatures. That's not how it works. The officer putting Marcus in the car paused, looking back at Robert with new understanding. Your son was Kia? 4 years ago. I'm sorry for your loss. The officer closed the car door harder than necessary. We'll make sure this gets handled properly. As the patrol car pulled away, the crowd began to disperse, but not before several neighbors came over to check on Robert and Sergeant. The Kowalskis, who'd been inside during the whole incident, emerged, apologizing profusely for ordering something that brought those men to the neighborhood. Mrs. Chen stayed, insisting on accompanying Robert and Sargent to the emergency vet clinic. "That dog is a hero," she said firmly, helping Robert into her car. "And you are too, for taking care of him. My brother served with a K-9 unit in Afghanistan. I know what these dogs give. They deserve better than what happened today." Sargent sat in the back seat, looking out the window, his tail wagging gently. The pain in his ribs was there, but secondary. He'd protected his person. That's what mattered. The vet confirmed bruising but no broken ribs. Sargent got pain medication and orders to rest for a week. Robert paid the bill and tried not to think about how he'd skip his own medications this month to afford it. Sargent was worth it. Always. That evening, back home, Robert sat on his porch again with Sargent curled up next to him, now on a soft bed with an ice pack wrapped in a towel against his side. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Robert stroked the dog's head gently, tears running down his weathered cheeks. "David would be proud of you," he whispered. "So proud." Sargent sighed contentedly and closed his eyes. What Robert didn't know yet was that one of the videos from that afternoon had already been uploaded to social media. By morning, it would have 2 million views. By the end of the week, 15 million. The headline that accompanied it: "Delivery driver kicks elderly man's dog, instantly regrets it when Mutt turns out to be Iraq War hero." The news crews would come. The story would spread. Donations would pour in from around the country to cover Sargent's vet bills and then some. A veterans organization would reach out to Robert, offering support and community. The delivery company would fire Marcus and issue a public apology. And somewhere in a county jail cell, Marcus would sit alone with his thoughts, watching that same video on the evening news, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. 3 weeks later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, there was a knock on Robert's door. He wasn't expecting anyone, so he approached cautiously, Sargent beside him. The dog's ribs had healed completely, though he still had a small limp on cold mornings. Robert opened the door to find Marcus standing there, but not the Marcus from before. This man looked smaller somehow, humbled. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he held a small bouquet of flowers awkwardly in one hand. "Mr. Foster," he began, his voice unsteady. "I know you probably don't want to see me. I know I don't deserve. I just needed to tell you I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry." Robert didn't speak, just waited. Marcus swallowed hard. "I spent 12 days in jail. Lost my job. My girlfriend left me. And honestly, I deserved all of it. But the worst part was watching that video over and over, seeing how I acted, seeing that look in your eyes when you talked about your son." He paused, tears spilling over. "My little brother's in the army right now, deployed overseas. And it hit me, watching that video, that he might not." He couldn't finish. Sargent had moved forward, sniffing Marcus's hand cautiously. The man froze, terrified. "It's okay," Robert said quietly. "He's not going to hurt you. He never wanted to. He just wanted you to stop." Marcus nodded, not daring to move. "I wrote to the Marine Corps, asked about your son. They sent me his service record. Mr. Foster, he was a hero. And Sargent, I had no idea. I just saw a dog. And I was angry. And I took it out on him. On both of you." He finally looked directly at Robert. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just needed you to know that I understand now what I did, what it meant, and that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be better." Robert studied the young man for a long moment. He thought about David, about the Marine Corps values his son had lived by: honor, courage, commitment, but also redemption, second chances, the belief that people could change. "The flowers are a nice gesture," Robert said finally, "but they're not for me. There's a veterans cemetery about 15 miles from here. Section 7, Row 23, Plot 14. Lance Corporal, David Foster. Take them there. Tell him you're sorry. Tell him you're trying to be better." He paused, and then, Actually, be better. Marcus nodded, tears streaming freely now. I will. I promise. I will. And Marcus? Robert called as the young man turned to leave. Write to your brother. Every week. Don't miss a single week, because you never know which letter might be the last one he gets to read. Yes, sir. Marcus's voice cracked. Thank you. For this chance. After he left, Mrs. Chen, who'd been watching from her porch, came over. That took strength, she said. Not everyone would have given him that. Robert shrugged, sinking into his rocking chair. David always believed people were worth fighting for, worth saving, even the ones who made mistakes. He scratched behind Sergeant's ear, and this old warrior here taught me something. He could have torn that boy apart. He had the training, the justification, but he chose restraint, chose to stop the threat without destroying the person. He smiled sadly. Maybe that's the real lesson. Power isn't about how much damage you can do. It's about how much control you have over that damage. Sergeant's tail thumped against the porch. Just twice. But it was enough. The sunset that evening was particularly beautiful, and Robert sat there with his dog, watching the colors fade from the sky. He thought about David, about Ellen, about all the things he'd lost, but also about what he'd gained. This scarred, scruffy warrior beside him. This bond forged in shared grief and loyalty. This reminder that sometimes heroes don't wear uniforms or badges. Sometimes they walk on four legs and ask for nothing but love in return. You know what, Sergeant? Robert said, his voice carrying into the gathering dusk. I think we're going to be okay. Both of us. We're going to be okay. Sergeant looked up at him, and in those brown eyes, Robert saw understanding, acceptance, peace. Sometimes the strongest bonds are forged in the fires of loss. Sometimes protection comes from the most unexpected places, and sometimes, just sometimes, cruelty opens the door for redemption, and heroes remind us what true strength really means. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, because every sergeant deserves to be celebrated. Every veteran, two-legged or four, deserves our respect. And every act of loyalty, no matter how small, deserves to be remembered.